So tonight we're gonna start on bottom of 65. So before we get going, we'll do our regular little readings and a little talk and some prayers. So
We do not represent any 12-step fellowship. We are here to share how the literature and the directions contained within the Big Book have transformed our lives in every way. We're here to share our experience with our own journey through the steps, what the steps mean to us, and how we have seen the steps change the lives of the many that we have worked with. The main focus of the study is to show people how the design for living can work in anyone's life when the literature is understood and, more importantly, applied in a practical way. What this looks like in everyday interactions and how the small moments and choices are what add up to an amazing new quality of recovery, relationships, and life satisfaction.
that's it.
That's it.
Okay, awesome. Creator, i.e. Magnol Creator, I ask you hear my prayers today. I have my Sundance family is out at a ceremony today, and right now I ask Creator that you send some more prayers, send our prayers over there to try to help whoever they're helping. Let the people who need the help get the help, and that they can heal whatever they're looking for. Creator, I ask for prayers for the people in our study and the people online and all of the people on the streets of Calgary who are struggling with addictions, who want a better life, who want to change and grow and try something different. I ask selfishly, Creator, for prayers for myself and in the ways that you can help me grow and learn about who I am. I ask for prayers for my girlfriend, Courtney, as well as myself as we venture through areas of our relationship that we haven't been in before, and it's always a challenge. Creator, I ask for your guidance in all areas of my life. I ask for prayers for my daughters. They struggle off and on, and just guide them in a good way. And my ex-wife, who's the best ex-wife there ever was, that you guide her in a good way and just try to give her the best life. She deserves it. Creator, I ask for your guidance in my words and my experiences today and the knowledge of the literature, and to pull what needs to be pulled out of the literature today to best serve and help heal myself and learn. I ask that you allow me to remove everything I think I know and allow me to have a new experience with everything. Thank you, Creator. Hi.
God, thank you for this space to come together and to study the literature with our friends, and for everyone online as well joining us. Thank you for my friendship with Bill and what we're able to do together, and how our friendship ebbs and flows and shows us truth about ourselves and ways that we can help each other and support each other. And for me, ways that I continue to push towards growth in areas that come up. Thank you for my kids and for the week that we have together, the family week. Thank you that I'm sober and that we can have good times together that aren't splattered with addiction and addiction-related problems. I pray for the people who are struggling to reach out, but continue to do it anyways. And pray for people who are just coming back, because that's really hard. Especially the last couple of phone calls that I had. I pray for those two women, specifically around the issues that they're struggling with, and that they're able to join the book study, and that they have a desire to seek you and to find out how you can make changes in their life. Everything is through a connection with a higher power, and help me to be able to speak what I need to speak through this literature that has been the most effective way to connect me to a higher power and to show others how to do that through this literature. Amen.
Okay. Something just came to me tonight that I'd like to kind of just bring up. And it involves you. And, you know, I'm not pointing you out, and I'm not going to bring up your name online, but I just want to like give you like huge props, because I know that you have been in recovery for what, about 18 months, 2 years, and then you relapsed. And your relapse was on marijuana, right? And then you came out and you stood up and you said, I relapsed. And that's the message that's so powerful in the program, because marijuana is now legal and most people are not going to ever do what you did. So I just want to say, and my opinion is my opinion, anyone can do whatever the fuck they want. God gave us brains to use, and he gave us brains to use how he gave them to us, not to be clouded with mind and mood altering substances. So I know how hard that was to like come out and say, and then reset a sobriety date based on that. It's fucking massive. And that's a good message to bring to the program that needs that message. So I just wanted to really give you like a heartfelt like shout out and say like, I'm fucking super proud of you, and I fucking honor that in like a way that you don't even understand. So that's awesome. And like, as we're going through this step 4 material, when we read the first little bit of step 4, it talked about, you know, what had been blocking us, what blocks us. Marijuana is going to block us too. Okay. It's resentments, it's fears, it's a whole bunch of things. But why would I need to keep using marijuana? I'm a fucking pothead from way back, man. I'm a pothead from way back. And I always swore that I would smoke pot my whole life. And I came in here and I did the steps, and I've never had another fucking hoot of pot. And I know that, you know, in one fellowship, it's an outside issue. And in the other fellowships, it's not an outside issue. And this fellowship that we're in here on the Big Book study doesn't like, we're not part of any one fellowship. We're part of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what we're part of. We're part of the Fellowship of the Spirit, this Big Book study. And if I really want to be free, and I really want like that vitality in life, I have to be free of the things that are blocking me. And if I'm still leaning on a crutch of marijuana, then I'm fucking still leaning on a crutch. It could be the same as any other crutch, but it just happens to be that it's legal now. So then my brain says that it's okay. And to me, it blocks you from sobriety and blocks you from the best life. So, you know, some people might like not want to hear that, but I think it's important. And I won't work with sponsees if they are smoking weed. They can, and there's sponsors that'll work with them, but I won't, because, and you know, and even with Suboxone, we talked about that a little while ago. I'll give a sponsee a fucking good shot at their recovery on Suboxone and methadone or whatever. But at a certain point, these drugs become a crutch and they block you from fucking the next level. And if you keep staying on these drugs, it's a decision based in self, and it will block you, and it will ultimately probably take you back out. So it's not an outside issue as far as I'm concerned, because my autonomy, my ability to self-govern is governed with God, and I can't govern myself with God if I'm putting shit in between me and God still. So
That's exactly it, is that it's like when in early recovery, when we're trying to build an actual like connection with God, and we're trying to move it from a theory to just, now I'm connected and I feel God working in me and through me. If there's an uncomfortable situation or a painful emotion or experience that happens, a person's going to grab for the easier, softer way, whatever that is. And if the person has it in their mind that alcohol is okay or marijuana is okay, the grab is for that instead of God, and sitting in that discomfort and learning through it and growing through it and doing what you need to do, what God's trying to do with you. It goes to the wayside for the marijuana that gives you the sense of ease and comfort immediately.
100%. Go ahead.
Maybe share, expand a bit on that in terms of like prescription medication and specifically antidepressants for sleeping pills. how you feel about those.
Can we answer that after the break? Because I can actually look up what AA says about that. Unless you want to speak to it now.
No, go ahead. We can do that at the break. Well,
I'd rather pull the literature and give that to you rather than get in a controversy about it.
yeah, and I do have a take on the doctor and prescribed and various things, but let's get going in this material, and then after break we'll kind of touch on that again. So we did the first 3 columns. We did the resentment, what the cause was, or what's the reason I'm resentful, and it affects mine. And when you really think of what those things are, we have been living with those aspects in our life every fucking day already. I always knew who you were. I always knew what you did. And I always knew that I was hurt over it. So when we really look at the resentment, like we will write the person down, but we're really not resentful at the person. We're resentful at the action that the person did. So even if like my best friend did what my worst enemy did to me, I would probably hate my best friend, probably even more because they were my best friend. So it's never really the person that you're resentful at. You're resentful at an idea of what the person did that doesn't align with what you think is right. And that's really important because we will attach the wrong to the person always. And maybe that person is, they're used to doing those kind of things. But the whole point of like the step 4, and we're going to get into it, all people are emotionally, spiritually sick and frequently wrong. And although we don't like their symptoms, well, that's the second column. That's the symptom of the spiritually sickness that they have and how they disturbed us, which is the third column. They, like ourselves, are sick too. So I just want to highlight, we already lived in this column 1, 2, 3, and 4 before we ever came to the program. We just never wrote it down. And sometimes we could see our part, but we always made the other person's part bigger. And like the level of manipulation within my own mind, my ability to gaslight in my own mind, it's there. But we don't really see that until we're like held to task. Until we write things down, we have somebody else show us, we'll never really see the truth. And even when we get some time in the program, we still have an inability to see the truth. That's why it's so important. Always work with pillars and sponsors. And not ones that are not 12-stepped and not ones that are fucking around. Like if you really want to grow, you have to be held to task by people that really give a shit more about your life than your feelings, right? And we have hard conversations like Janine and I, she said in her prayer, like, how she grows and we both grow. Sometimes I do shit she doesn't like and I do shit she doesn't like. But at the end of the day, we end up calling each other and saying, okay, look, we need to talk this out. And then we'll go for a bite to eat and then we'll fucking have these hard conversations. Even though like back in the day, I wouldn't want to, I never would have. I would have just said, no, you know what? Fuck you. I'm pretty good. Thanks. Right. But today, we can do that. Right?
Yeah.
And we don't always even agree when the conversation's done, but at least we have more of an understanding and we can at least maybe see it a little differently than we did fucking an hour ago. Right. So that's important.
And that's the actual, I think, the skill of putting this into practice. Like when you're looking at the cause or the symptom of how they disturbed me, it's like I think of myself moving through the recovery process and how I had to look at all my beliefs, especially in step 2, like what was blocking me off from God and just in general, my beliefs that were leading me to do and think and feel in certain ways and how much actually came down to my belief systems. And so it's not that when he and I disagree, it's not that either of us are right or wrong sometimes. It's that his way of doing things makes sense to him. And I know that there was one time where we sat down and we did a little questionnaire thing and he was saying his answers out loud. And I learned a lot about him and how he thinks. And then even though he does it a different way, it's like, I see his angle. I wouldn't do it that way, but it makes sense to him. And so having a more of an understanding, you don't have to agree, but you have that information to actually free up some room on, okay, well, we have to, make accommodations where we need to. And then you can expand that into everybody, the person who cuts you off in traffic, or your mother-in-law, or whatever it is. You can say, like, they're coming from a place where they think that this is right, or this is how it is for them. And then you're in less conflict with people when you have more of an understanding instead of just an assumption and a resentment.
Roger. Okay, I'm gonna read. Or Janine's gonna read. Do you want to read?
Sure.
Okay.
We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent is that the world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of the alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholic, these things are poison.
Let's stop that for a second. Okay, so just a couple things on that first paragraph at the top of 56. Talks about the first thing apparent was the world and its people were often quite wrong. And that's as far as most of us get. The world and the people are wrong, and we kind of leave it at that, right? The usual outcome was the people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was more remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. The more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. So that's like the fight in the head, right? I'm continually fighting in my head about what you've done, what the world's done, how it's affecting me. And then I stay sore, and but then I get guilty in my own right. I'm remorseful at myself. I fucking hate myself too. Like, there's just a battle going on with resentment in my own head constantly. And then it goes into the next paragraph where it is plain that life, which includes deep resentment, leads only to futility and unhappiness. So a lot of us, when we first come to the program, we're like the idea that I got to let go of some of these resentments is fucking absurd. Like, look what that person did to me. Like, what do you mean I got to forgive this person or let that go? Like, the idea just seems like insane. Why would I? Like, why the fuck would I? I spent my whole life, right from fucking kindergarten, maybe even before kindergarten, being taught by my parents, by society, by TV, that resentments are actually good. And it's like, fuck you. The basis of a lot of television shows is resentment, is anger, is all the things that you're trying to tell me to not do. So for me to really even fathom that is something like that I can't really comprehend at first. And I didn't really get it, right? But when you really think about the people in your life who are the sickest, okay? They might be your parents, they could be your grandparents, but think about whoever you know in your life that's the fucking sickest person, who's angry or who's in jail or wherever they are. And ask yourself about their resentments, right? It only leads to futility and unhappiness. And you're always kind of thinking about these people going, why would you fucking want to be like that? How can you be like that? Like, you almost feel sorry for the people that are like that, right? Like, I remember, that's probably not a fair one. I was going to use my grandpa on my mom's side, but that's not really a fair one. I didn't know him that well. But maybe some of these guys I used to work with, I remember some of these guys I used to work with, and they were just fucking miserable pricks. They just came to work and they were fucking mean and angry and they would fucking leave. But I remember, like, on the ride home from work every day, they'd just bitch about the boss and they'd bitch about the equipment, and they're just always fucking bitching, right? And it kind of like sucks your your energy out of you and makes you more fucking cynical and resentful, right? Who wants to fucking live like that? And when we went through the We Agnostics chapter, there's a big piece of that We Agnostics chapter. It's about change. It's about you don't have to fucking believe what it is that you believe. You can try to change. That's as simple as it can be. So with resentments, you know, that's one thing that we got to do. And what I love about this next line is to the precise extent that we permit these resentments, to the precise extent that I permit a resentment, do I squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? So I'm going to use a personal example of my own life this weekend. So on Friday, I hadn't seen my girlfriend, my old lady, in a couple of days. And then I was going to be gone for 2 days in ceremony up in Northern Alberta. So I wanted to go see her Friday night, spend the night, and I would fuck off up north first thing Saturday morning. Anyway, we get there, and then I start talking about a certain subject, and then she chimes in and fucking doesn't really like my take or how I started the conversation. So she's like now over talking me, and then it just started a fucking like argument. Wasn't even really an argument. It was just like I said, I just said, fuck you, I'm out of here, and I fucked off. And she's like texting me, and I'm like, fuck, I ain't texting, right? And I'm fucking done. I'm fucking going to bed. I got to get up early, and I'm fucking done. But now 2 days of this has gone by, and I'm like living in my own resentment, in my own shit. But I did talk to Pillars, and I really looked at my part, and I really looked at her part, and I looked at my part, and I saw where I was wrong. But I was still holding on to that fucking part, that to the precise extent that I permit that, do I squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? So I didn't really, out of like 100% enjoyment of like where I was going and the freedom of mind, I didn't have a full freedom of mind because I still was thinking about the stupid fucking thing and not letting it go. And then my buddy, he goes, okay, text her and like kind of put this to bed so you can be free. So I texted her, but I just texted her, hey. Right. So I'm still like holding on to it, right? And then she messages me like 2 hours later, and I know she gets back to me right away. So she's resentful, and it took 2 hours. But then I know I'm going in the ceremony, my phone's got to be off for like the next 10 hours. So she responds right before I go into ceremony, and then I didn't answer, right? So now for the next, like, then I get out of ceremony at like 2-3 in the morning, and I'm like, hey, and I do it again. But then I fucking, because of ceremony and seeing the truth of the matter, I'm calling her, and I'm actually going to tell her like from my heart, because ceremony changed me even more and made me see the truth. So I came out of ceremony. I called her like 3 times at like 3 and 4 in the morning, but she didn't answer, right? Then the next day I did talk to her, and I went there yesterday, and I had that conversation. And that's the conversation she wanted to have to begin with, but I wasn't really willing to, right? Because I'm living in my self-righteous anger and my self-righteous pride. And like part of my talk with my pillar was like, I can actually stay in this. And if she says the wrong thing, I can fucking respond in a way that will end the fucking relationship. And I'll fucking pridefully stay in that. And I'll fucking blow a whole lifetime of a really good partner because of my fucking pride in a couple moments. And that's the fucking, that's selfish self-centeredness to the fucking core. And then I'll rationalize and justify why we broke up. And I'll tell you what she fucking did. But I won't tell you how my fucking pride ruined it. Right? So that's like, if I didn't have my pillars and I didn't have this program and I didn't have the things that I have, I would have blown that shit up over something fucking so stupid and small. And when I look at the pattern of my life, I can do that in all sorts of areas, jobs, friendships, fucking all sorts of things. So that pride and my self-righteousness, I really got to keep an eye on, okay? Anything?
No, that's just facts.
Right.
Yeah, this is like up there in my like top 5 parts of the book that are up there. because when I read it, it just reminds me of doing the same thing and everyone else is the problem. And just recently I was talking to someone who quit another job, and it's the employer's fault again. And it's another reason that the employer wasn't a good fit for this person. And it's like, they just can't keep a job. And this has been a decade of this. And it's always something failure on the employer. And it's like, okay, like at what point do we look at our part? And it's like, maybe the problem is you know? And so this, when I read it, you know, in treatment there, I was like, okay, yeah, like the world is quite wrong. And this is also a line that when I'm stewing about something, my sponsor brings me back to this. And it's like, it's kind of validating. She's like, what does that say? And I'm like, the world and its people were often quite wrong. She's like, yeah, and so are you. But it's like, okay, everybody is wrong sometimes. And I read this to her and we talk it out. But it's like, if we just stop at the employer, it's the employer's fault, or it's my ex's fault, or it's my series of ex's faults, it's like I just keep creating the new experiences with other people, and they're actually just the same experiences. It's like, if I'm not changing me, I'm going to continue to just have the same relationship experiences, and those all end the same, with the same pattern of the ghosting. And it's like the not talking and not communicating. So as a result, I'm learning how to do that in recovery, because I've never learned. And I've just had these patterns of the same shit going on over and over. And it's like, here I thought, oh my gosh, like, yeah, if I only just look at them, the outcome is people just will continue to wrong me. And why is that? That's not a victim way. That's because people are going to continue to wrong me because I'm showing up in the same way. And so I'm attracting the same stuff. And then I'm getting the same experiences, and I'm staying sore. And then I go, oh, well, maybe it is me. Like, maybe there's a moment that okay, well, and I get a resolve, you know, like I'm going to take a relationship course, or I'm going to take a communication course, or I'm going to take a break from dating, or I'm going, whatever it is, right? But then I go back and I'm doing the same stuff. Why? Because I'm powerless against myself, and I needed a higher power, and I needed the truth. And I found that in this program. And so it's like, once I figured out that I'm the reason I'm sore, because I am getting the same experiences. And then later down, it says, this is the key. We're creating the list, and this is the key. This is actually how I'm going to see my own part and why I'm creating these same patterns over and over and over. So when I went into this sort of like my step 5, specifically, I was kind of like my second round of steps. I was excited because I'm like, okay, the truth is going to actually get the change, because the problem is me. And I see that, and I need to see it, because the more I can see it, the more I'm going to create better experiences in my life, in my recovery. So it was exciting for me the second time around.
10-4. Okay, I just want to touch on a couple things. Michael W. just sent me a text that reminded me of something also. So as we keep reading this page, but with the alcoholic whose hope is a maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, that line you will see it back in step 9. Okay, that's a step 9 line as well. Okay, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. So if it doesn't infinitely put you in the grave, which it will, because it's the #1 offender, it will put in the grave your relationships with people that you love. Okay, we found it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die.
And I think, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I think like any of the, like, I'm thinking of how deadly self-pity is when resentment's like turning into the self-pity stuff. Like, you can put all of the emotions in there and the defects in there. And when you're in that, like when you're in that sort of place, you're squandering, you're wasting what could be useful time, and you're not connected. So it's not just resentment that cuts you off, and it's not just the resentment that will make you waste the hours. It's like being in self like that, period.
10-4, good point. And if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They were maybe the dubious luxury of normal men. For alcoholics, these things are poison. So what I want to highlight here about anger is, you go to the rooms, and a lot of rooms you're going to hear, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to live in anger. And the book doesn't say that. And for me, as an alcoholic who's worked with many other alcoholics, it is a dubious luxury of normal people. What does dubious mean, Chris? Questionable. So is it actually a luxury of a normal person? Not really. So, but for us, it's poison. Okay. So for us, especially in new recovery in that first couple years, like if you're hanging around with people that are saying it's okay for you to fucking be angry, I call bullshit. It's not. It's an opportunity for you to see what you need to fucking see at a deeper level, because anger is always the headline and it's never anger. It's always tied into your emotional security somehow, some way, self-worth. It's tied into a belief that you believe to be true that's not true. Maybe it's about you or about society. But for me, anger is not a dubious luxury for us at all. But you will go to the rooms and you will hear that it's okay to be angry. I do not fucking agree with that. Yes, anger will be an emotion, but anger today for me is not really a primary emotion. It doesn't come out like anger. It comes out in frustration, comes out in like little different ways, but it's not like anger. Okay. And my resentment isn't like really heavy towards people anymore. And if it is, then I know I got some fucking work to do, because I don't want to carry that shit around. But to go off that line to page 90 in the 12 and 12, if you have it, flip, and if you don't worry. As Michael sent me, it's a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the fucking cause, there is something wrong with us. And when I first read that back in my first year recovery, I didn't agree with it, because I figured that you guys were to blame or something else was to blame. And I didn't fully believe this line, but I do today. So it is a spiritual law that every time I'm disturbed inside, the problem's within me. I find some person, place, or thing unacceptable to me. And until I can find acceptance for that person, place, thing, or situation, I won't have peace in that area. So there's always something for me to look at and fucking try to discern what the idea is. And you've heard me talk a lot in this big book study about beliefs. Because it is beliefs that everything comes from. It is a sentiment, and a sentiment is a belief. Every single thing that we believe to be right or wrong, right, good for us, bad for us, it's all based in a fucking ideology or sentiment of some sort. Some of which you've learned through school or through your culture or whatever, and some through just fucking living on the planet because you don't really have a choice in some of the belief systems you believe anyway. So I always encourage you to look at a belief system and why do you actually believe in whatever it is that you believe in.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. Like, it's like you didn't know until you did step 4 or 5. And then I like how this is like the spiritual axiom piece is out of step 10. So as you're continuing to watch for it, because now you have the awareness from your 4 and 5 of the things when they come up.
Precise, like it says, precise, constant vigilance.
Yeah. And so when you see it, and this is part of the step 10, right? Where it's like, when you're disturbed, it's you, like, and that's what it's telling you in step 10. So it's in there because as you're continuing to watch for it, it's like when things come up, resentment, like, look at you. It's like, you can be mad at the world, you know, like, but that's not going to get you anywhere. That's going to continue. Like it's saying here, you're just going to get sore because you're not looking at you. So spiritual axiom directs us to look at us, because we're disturbed. It's something in us that needs to be changed. And until we do that, we won't be set free from it.
Yeah, dude. So back to my little example of with my girlfriend last night when we had to talk, I owned my part. And I said, there's a part, I said, I don't even know how to navigate. I said, I don't know how to not fuck off sometimes. I said, I'm going to try not to. Maybe I can say to you like, okay, I got to leave. I'll be back in an hour. Or maybe I can give you a kiss and say, okay, I'm fucking pissed off, but I'm going to give you a kiss. I'll call you later. But I don't even know I don't even know what the next step is sometimes. But at least if I voice it somehow, some way, and I at least try to acknowledge it, and I'm fucking asking this power creator to fucking help me because he knows, he'll hopefully show me the answer at some point, right? So as long as I'm willing, I believe he'll show me the answer. And some of what I don't get the answer on is what I'm resisting. right? I maybe have been resisting this lesson out of my own self-righteousness for quite some time, right? And until I let go of what it is I'm resisting, I won't get what it is that I fucking need. But I can't always see what that is. That's why I need help. I need you guys. I need my pillars. I need my sponsor. On this page 90 again, did someone have something? So if somebody, okay, are there no exceptions to the rule, the spiritual axiom? What about justifiable anger? If somebody cheats us, aren't we entitled to be mad? Question mark. Can we be properly angry with self-righteous folk? For us AAs, these are dangerous exceptions, which we found that justified anger ought to be left to those better qualified. So again, it's saying no to the fucking anger. And later in this step 10, it talks about self-restraint takes a top priority rating. Then self-restraint is many aspects of your defective character. But as far as anger goes, sometimes it means maybe I just shut the fuck up and I don't say anything to you to make it worse. And sometimes love and tolerance of others is our code, yeah. But sometimes love and tolerance has to start with fucking hate and tolerate. I fucking hate you and I tolerate you, but I'm going to practice self-restraint. I'm not going to fucking say anything because I don't want to make it worse. And I'm going to resist my principled life here, but I'm going to fucking try. And you know what? I think that's how I started in my journey on the anger and stuff and judgment and contempt. Because I remember back in those early days, there were some motherfuckers I really hated for doing stupid shit. And I just bit my tongue. So I'm just going to take this to another spot. With my sponsor, who I have now, I'll go to his place and I'll start my work for that day. And I meet him every 2 weeks right now. And if I go in there and because he always says, okay, what's up? Basically, tell me about your life, right? So what I do is I start dumping about my whole life so he can get all the data that he needs. And I try not to like skew it my way, the best of my ability. And then if I go in there self-pity or victim or whatever, he'll just say wrong fucking house. Wrong fucking house. He's like, turn the fuck around, go out, and then come back and let's try this again. Because he won't let me, right? Because that's not the way that this works. He's got 30 years of recovery, and that's why, and he's an ass kicker, which is why I have him as my sponsor.
A couple of weeks ago, I asked you, there was some specific situation. It wasn't you, but it was the question of how do you go from catching your defects? Remember that conversation? And you said sometimes it's just, you got to just catch it and not say anything. And that's like how you overcame the anger, right? You missed it, caught it, missed it, caught it. And then you started catching it more and more. And so it's the same thing that you're describing with yourself is like the next level is now now you're catching it. And now the next level is how do you catch it and not storm off? And that is an unknown territory. And that's a lot of how recovery is for people when they're learning a different way, because as addicts and alcoholics, we ran. That was just what we did. And so that's default setting. So catching the anger, you've conquered that for the most part. And the next level for you in your recovery is just figuring out
The third column of it.
Yeah.
Why does it hurt me? What is it about it? And that's what I was telling Courtney, my girlfriend. I said, I don't know why. I don't know what it is. I don't know what drives me powerfully, blindly, and subtly sometimes. And like what the other person will do, like my girlfriend, she'll hold me to a level of fucking perfection in my spiritual life that she expects me to be perfect. And I'm like, I fucking for sure ain't fucking perfect. And I don't even know why I act the way I act sometimes. So once you know that I don't fucking know, then don't hold me to any fucking perfection, because you're going to be sadly disappointed. Right? And we got to remember that. And then the other thing about anger and working on this is kind of step 6 territory. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, it's lust, it's anger, it's judgment, it's fucking whatever it might be. You're always going to miss it because you act in it for your whole life. You're going to miss it. You're going to miss it. You're going to miss it. While we claim spiritual progress rather than perfection. So even if you're missing it and you're like, fuck, we got to learn how to not guilt and shame ourselves over that, but not fucking let it slide either. And be willing and keep praying and asking God for help so that we can catch it. Because I got to the point, like in a lot of these areas where I'd fucking miss it fucking 1,000 times, and then I caught it. And in the moment I caught it, I was like, fuck yeah. It's just like scoring the Stanley Cup goal, right? Yes. And then I'd act differently, and then the whole situation would unfold differently. And I was like, holy fuck, that was awesome. But then I'd miss it again, right? But now today the pendulum has shifted and I catch it almost way more than I ever miss it. And, you know, even if I do fuck it up still, I got to be gentle on myself too. And fucking remember that I'm still fucking, you know, human, right?
When you described that moment of like you caught it and then you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. It's like, oh, that's like the next thing of why a person wants to actually seek and do God's will. That's like the beginning of it turning from 6 to 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
I just want to say something about the resentment today. I turned a corner with it because I was going through a battle. I'm like, okay, if the book's right about everything, why does it say resentment's the #1 offender? Because like I'm the most scared of self-pity. And like I think that that's like the #1 offender. And so I've been kind of going back and forth with this and doing some praying about it to get some clarity. And today it happened in the kitchen and I wasn't even angry, but I realized how scared I am of being angry, how that is the most uncomfortable feeling that I want to escape from. And I just don't feel I can cope. And so for me, like, I think what I learned is that it's the #1 offender for me. It is because I'm scared to death of it. I'm not scared of self-pity, but I'm terrified of resentment because the adrenaline, the chest goes, the heart goes, and I want to get out of it. And I can see how if I stayed in anger, I would want relief from that. And it would put me at such a high risk to escape what's happening in my body and my mind to get the instant relief from that.
But it's not the self-pity that's the offender, it's the fear. The #1 offender becomes fear. And when you peel back the layers of what it is, it's based in fear.
if I could get resentful and go right to fear without feeling the physical part, that would be good. It's the physical anger that I get scared of,
So it's fear.
but I don't get to fear right away. Because
No, but it's the driver.
Feel like
It's
like
the
I wanna
driver under
escape.
it all.
agreed, but I can't get to anger to fear.
Roger.
So I'm scared of the anger.
Okay, anyway, let's keep going.
If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, it is poison. We turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoings of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like the symptoms and the way that they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, "This is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done."
Okay. Let's just finish that paragraph.
We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongdoings others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight.
Okay. So we turn back to the list. So let's say you're sponsoring or you're doing your first set of steps, the first 3 columns are given to my sponsee right away. I get to the step 4, I'm giving them the first 3 columns. and then I give them 2 weeks or so to get that material written out. And then they come back to me, and then I look at their first 3 columns, who it is, what the resentments are, and then the third column of what it affects based on what was underlined in the last session for the third column. And then they come back, and now we get into the fourth column. As long as their first 3 columns look good, now we move on to this fourth column and fears. That's how I do it. Fourth column and then fears. But first we're at fourth column. So we turn back to the list. For it held the key to our future. We are prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. So I've been living my whole life looking at the first 3 columns. That's how I live my life. The fourth column is so fucking important, right? Especially when we're new. Like I said, the third column becomes more important down the road, but when we're new in that first couple years or so, especially the first year, the fourth column's really important. So we're looking at it from an entirely different angle. We begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us. And that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real. Some of these resentments that we built in our heads, they started with like a millimeter of maybe wrongs, but over the years of us building it, it actually became a lot of fancied resentment or harm, okay? And the fancied part is how right we are in it too, right? So it's fancied in the fact that I'll blame you, because I can build that up over time, but I can also build up over time how I'm not to blame, right? And how good of a saint I am in this whole situation, right? And when you look at like marriages and divorces, each person in the marriage, while they're going through the divorce, they're a fucking saint and the other person's totally to blame, right? So had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments has to be mastered, but how? We cannot wish them away any more than alcohol. So then that brings me to this other statement where you here in the program, just let it go. Just let it go, let it go, let it go. And like, if your sponsor is just telling you and you got a resentment and you're new and they just say, let it go, get a fucking new sponsor. Because if you could just let shit go because you wanted to let it go, you guys wouldn't fucking be here. We wouldn't be fucking alcoholics and addicts. So when you hear people just tell you to let it go, they don't fucking understand the depth of what the fuck is going on. You can't just let it go. It takes work to let shit go. It takes you seeing your part. It takes you understanding that other people are emotionally ill, spiritually sick, frequently wrong. And it takes a fucking consistent, persistent commitment to pray and fucking resolutely turn your thoughts to other people. So there's a process to actually letting go. And a lot of the traumas that our body carries, that shit doesn't just let go because you want it to let go. It happens over fucking years of fucking doing spiritual discipline. And the best way that I found to let shit go is to fucking sponsor. The more you sponsor, the more you will see yourself in another person. And the more you get to talk about whatever it is that you haven't been able to let go, and you will fucking, that power that it has in you, it'll release its power. And it's kind of like when you've done a step 5, everyone does a step 5 and you get some relief from it. Imagine saying a step 5 for that trauma fucking, and you do it every day with the sponsee, and you can find how that experience can benefit somebody else. You're fucking voicing it more and more, and it loses its power, and you start seeing how it can benefit other people. And you start understanding other people are just fucking trying the best they can do, even the ones that really fucked with you. So even though you're just trying to let go of whatever it is, you let go of many things that you can't even actually see. You're letting go of things all the time through sponsorship that you can't even really understand or see, which is so fucking important, because the journey of healing isn't linear. When you look at underneath the roots, like the surface of the ground, and then you have the tree roots below the ground, the roots below the ground actually are why the tree is the tree, right? But all the systems under the ground are the roots that cross and grow into each other. That's kind of like how resentments go. That's how everything goes. And I need to let that shit go under the ground. So I'm letting, if I let a piece of this go, I let a piece of that go. And if I'm working on this over here, I'm working on stuff underneath that I don't even really understand. That's really, really helpful to me and my well-being and my peace and serenity and love and tolerance and kindness and all the things that we're trying to practice here. So this was our course. So when we talk about directions in the program, now it's telling you exactly what the direction is. Here's your course. Boom. You want to know what the direction is? Boom. Here it is. This is the course. Although we did not, we realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. First column. That's the person who wronged you. Although we did not like their symptoms. Second column. Is there symptoms of what? Being spiritually sick. Third column, and the way they disturbed us. That's how they're disturbing us. And they're disturbing us deep down where the problems arise from. They, like ourselves, are sick too. Fuck, just like me. How many resentment lists have I made? Fucking tons. God help us show them the same tolerance, patience, pity we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When the person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How may I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. So you guys know Jesse, who was here the other day? When he sponsors, and some of you guys have been sponsored by him, as he goes through this book, he will not give you anything that's on the next page. He will not give you any chips that are further into the program. You do not see this prayer or any other prayer until you open this page right here and you read it. I do it much differently. So now we're getting into more directions. This is the fourth column. This is where we practice this, not just in the fourth column in step 4. This is now in life. Okay? What does it say? We avoid retaliation or argument, fucking period. That's it. You fucking piss me off, I don't need to justify it anymore. I avoid retaliation or argument, period. Maybe self-restraint does take a top priority rating right now. And I have to leave. And although I want to fucking double barrel you with my anger and what I think, I avoid retaliation or argument, fucking period. Why? Because I wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, what happens if I act out like that? I destroy my chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. And when you look at that prayer at the top of the page, in the original manuscript, it talks about treating this person like a sick friend with cancer. And imagine if you have like a sick friend that had cancer. Maybe they were a fucking asshole your whole life. And then they got cancer. And they're on their deathbed and they're still an asshole to you. Your whole demeanor changes with them because you know that they're sick and they're dying. And they can be an asshole and you're still going to do whatever it is you need to do to try to help them. Right? You might not like it, but you're going to. And that's why he used in the original manuscript a sick person with cancer. 4. So now we're referring to our list again. So I gave you guys the column 1, right? Resentments, the little baby number 1, the baby number 2, and the baby number 3. Did I give you guys the baby number 4? No? Okay, this is where the baby number 4 goes in the big book in your resentments. Referring to our list again, a baby number 4 goes right before the R. That means 4th column. So referring to our list again, the resentment list, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done. So once you get to this 4th column, now, yep. So on that second main paragraph, or actually it's the beginning of the 3rd paragraph on page 67, it says referring to our list again, put a baby number 4 before referring. So 4th column, putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done. How easy is that? It's not easy at all when we first try, right? It wasn't even that easy for me the other day when I was doing it, when it was me and my old lady. But I was able to do it. And with the talk with my pillar really helped because my brain still wants me to be right, right? So I need to talk to him. Okay, so he's coming back to me with his first 3 columns done, and now we're getting into the 4th column. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. The word resolutely is important in this sentence because it means in an admirably determined, purposeful, and unwavering manner. That's what resolutely means.
Okay.
In a determined, admirably purposeful, determined, unwavering manner. Something like that. And why that word is so important is because we resolutely, in a admirably purposeful way, unwavering and determined way, we look for our own mistakes, not yours at all. Putting out of our minds entirely the wrongs that somebody has done to us, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. That's it, period. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? So in that 4th column, when I go through this with somebody, I'm going to be okay. In that resentment, where were you selfish? Okay? Where were you fucking dishonest? Not just with you, but even with myself. Where am I dishonest with myself? Right? So let's just say for me and my girlfriend and that resentment. Well, I was selfish because I was sitting in self-righteous anger thinking that I'm right. Right? Where was I selfish? Walking out of her house without giving her any explanation of where I'm going. Right? Where was I dishonest? I was dishonest because I actually didn't tell her the truth of how I really felt before I left. So we need to set our minds in the right frame of mind to go through this 4th column. Because
I appreciate your emphasis on resolution.
yeah, it's an important word. And it comes up again in the 10th step. And then the 10th step, it also is really important. So the word resolutely super important. So where are we selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? I got to identify those areas. And when I work with somebody new, what I do is I go through probably 5 resentments with them at that point. I'll do maybe a family one, right? Or maybe 2 family ones. A lot of fucking like mothers don't think they're resentful at their kids. So we got to look at like how people are actually resentful, which is why way back at the beginning it says why we were angry. Well, I get agitated at my kids. I get annoyed at my kids. And so if I just use anger as a parent, I won't have my kids on the list. Because who wants to be resentful at their own kid? My pride will not allow me to write down my kid as a resentment if I'm not fucking versed in what we're doing. That's why I always say, look up anger and look at all the synonyms so that you can see what synonyms are used with anger. Because then you can write down your kid and people that you wouldn't normally write down. So anyway, I have to find out where I'd been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. So I go through 5, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, or even 10. Depending on the sponsee, I may have to do 10 resentments with them and walk them through one by one and show them their part. Okay, you were selfish, Bill, by you fucking, not speaking your truth. And then you were selfish by leaving. You were selfish by slamming that door. You were selfish. You were dishonest because you didn't share the truth of how you felt, right? I was frightened. What was I frightened of? Well, I write down what I was frightened about, right? Or at least we talk about it. So with each resentment, so if I have 2 resentments against my old lady, I was selfish, dishonest, and afraid here for this one. Then I was selfish, dishonest, and afraid for this resentment. And maybe there's 3. Well, I was now just dishonest and self-seeking for the other one. But I write down each word and however many times it needs to be written down for each resentment. And why? Because that fucking pen has a subconscious connection, and then I get to feel and see the pattern as I'm writing. A lot of people will do the check boxes for this, right? Treatment centers do check boxes, a lot of them. But you don't get the value of fucking connecting your subconscious to the page and what you're doing when you're just checking boxes. you just start checking, and you might intentionally be doing it okay on the first 4 or 5. But if you got 100 resentments, by the time you're 15 resentments in, you're just checking boxes off. And not really, it's not hitting anything. Right? So though the situation had not been entirely our fault. No situation is actually probably entirely your fault, but it doesn't matter. We tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. And why do I do 5 or 10 resentments with the person, my sponsee? Because they're not used to looking at it from an entirely different angle. So I have to get them into the groove of how to do this. And if I can get them to fucking get going on this, then the rest of that step 4 really works well. And then they can write it all out. And then by the time they're done that step 4, they're already having a psychic change because they're starting to see their fucking bullshit. And if the person really wants to grow, they'll see it. And they'll call themselves out on their own shit that they never called themselves on ever, that they couldn't, because how could you? So the inventory was ours, not the other man's. And it's always ours, always ours. And that's why I say, if you're working with people who are co-signing your fucking anger and your bullshit, get a new fucking sponsor, because the inventory is ours, always. When I fucking get a call from my sponsee, I might point out that the person's emotionally ill, spiritually sick, and frequently wrong. Okay, that's good enough for them. But the inventory is yours, motherfucker. We're looking at where you're selfish, dishonest, resentful, and really it all boils down to being afraid. And then we peel that apart and that's the third column. We're talking about third column stuff right now, right? Affects my self-esteem, my security. And that's the important stuff. And that kind of reveals itself through time. So when we saw our faults, we listed them, we placed them before us in black and white. So now we're talking about our faults. We're talking about our wrongs and some of our harms. So some of what we do in this program, a lot of sponsors won't bring up the harms in the step 4, but that's what it's saying right here, right? It's saying we listed our faults, our defects, in black and white. We admitted our wrongs. Part of our wrongs is where I harmed you. So you'll notice, and this is one thing I will give treatment centers that they have done a good job on, is they have a harms list in their step 4 and 5 process. And that harms list is super important. It's kind of like bringing the step 8 into the step 4 and 5. Although it does talk about it right here, right? So it's important as you're sponsoring to try to bring the harms into the 4 and the 5. Why? Because when you do a step 5, it's really important for the person to see the harms and how their bullshit is affecting other people. Because when that person's humbled properly in the 5, then the step 6 and 7 mean something. Okay? We'll get more into that, but that's what it's saying. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we were willing to set these matters straight. So part of setting that matter straight is changing of your character in step 6, and actually your step 8 and 9 later in the process. And you'll see that again in the sex conduct. Anyway, let's keep going. Janine, you're up.
Okay, so to answer that question, I don't want to spend a whole ton of time reading the whole shebang, but you can get the PDF online if you Google living sober and then say avoiding dangerous drugs and medication. And this is the AA literature. And so there's a couple of pages on the opinion, and the opinion is why they have the opinion, and it ends with chemical substitutions for life simply don't interest us anymore. Now that we know what genuine living is, but there's a bunch of text talking you through. So if you need the information.
I guess I was curious about your perspective, if it does, but I would appreciate you said that.
My perspective is that sometimes people, see, this just gets into a total outside issue and I think
Yeah, totally relevant and not an outside issue.
it is an outside issue.
It's a fucking sponsorship.
Okay, so I would say that I would never tell somebody to get off an antidepressant. Sometimes people report them being helpful. However, research shows that exercise, say, is just as effective, if not more effective, for mild to moderate depression. So there's lots of things that can be done holistically that people don't actually really go to for the most part. So I would say if you've tried everything else and it is failing you, and I mean like eating better, sleeping better, exercising, drinking more water, like the basics, and you still feel like you need an antidepressant, then maybe you need an antidepressant, because I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't know, but I know what the research says about antidepressants, and it's that there's other ways to treat it that are equally, if not more effective. I've seen that a lot. I think that for me, if I smoke marijuana, it's like I'm on acid, and I can't imagine how I would be doing this program if I was smoking marijuana. So I see that come up a lot in like, well, it's for pain and it's for, and well, it's not my recovery. But I know that if you have a mind altering substance at all, you wouldn't be considered sober because you're using a mind altering substance. I hear the argument of, but it's just CBD. I can't speak to that because like I said, I cannot smoke weed. It's a bad experience for me. So I don't have a ton of my own knowledge for that. I know that I couldn't connect to God like that, or maybe I think I would, but I'd be tripping out. One time I thought there was like, I was going over a bridge and there was purple water under, like there was no water. There was, so I don't know. I wish you the best if that's your case and you feel like it's working. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of situations and there's a lot of like factors that go into that answer. So that's why I'm hesitant to answer that. I know that say that if you see this play out, you've got your health, your physical health, you've got your environmental situation, you've got your genetics, you've got your coping skills, you've got your, do you have a program or not? Like these are people using antidepressants. Like it's a complex issue because everybody's so different. That's why I said it was an outside issue, because I would be like, no,
It's not an outside issue.
it's kind of an outside issue
No, it
because I'm not a
If
psychiatrist.
Jesse was fucking sitting here, we'd be fucking talking about it because it's not an outside issue.
I would not just
Okay.
tell somebody to get.
I'm
off
gonna
medication.
give you my take based on my sponsorship and what I've seen. And I don't tell somebody to get off anything that a doctor's prescribed. But I do believe that untreated alcoholism looks like fucking many different things. Like clinical anxiety and clinical depression in many instances are untreated alcoholism. The program of action that we fucking have here can medicate numerous fucking things in our lives that we have labeled whatever the fuck it is. And part of that is when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally. Depression, clinical fucking depression is mental. Anxiety is fucking, comes in many forms. It's also mental. And there's other mental issues that I've seen fucking vanish because of a relationship with God and doing the things that we do here. And I will suggest to people, fuck, maybe it's time to fucking try something different. Maybe why don't you want to suggest coming off your antipsychotics? I don't know if that's a good idea, but do what you need to do and see what there is out there for another solution. And, I just find too many people looking for a fucking another drug in another different way or another solution when God's the fucking solution. Okay. I got a guy online. Serge, go ahead, bud, before we get going here.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak my experience with that too. As I was on antidepressants for a little bit, and then I was also experimenting with different things to try to keep my mood elevated. I guess it was a psilocybin is what I was taking. thinking microdosing, whatever else. But what ended up happening to me, and I think it ties a lot to what you said earlier there, Bill, is that I had to come to a point where my sponsor brought me to a point to like, it wasn't his place to decide for me what I was going to do next, but he brought me to a point of thinking, well, listen, are you willing to be open that you might not need this crutch in the future? Are you willing to get to a point where everything's going to change and you might be able to put that away? Are you willing to look at an entire psychic change means everything you think you know and that you think you need to survive might be completely different. You don't even know it. And from that point, I was able to carry on with the steps, and kind of like what you talked about, got to a point where I was like, I never touched it again. Never even had the thought of doing it again. Right. And I think that's where it's a lot simpler of an issue than try to tell people what to do. Is more like, let's get through the process and see if you're honest enough how you feel about this and why you're using it and why you want to get off of them. And then, like you said, it's not like tomorrow you got to get off all those meds and you think it'd be okay. It's more like start the process, and it takes time. It's not something you can't get off of anti-anxiety meds overnight or antidepressants overnight. But if your life is starting to get easier and there's less self-imposed stress on your life, then maybe you start by lowering the dose and you can kind of move forward. But I think it just starts with the idea of being open, like be willing to see a future without it, a future that's different. Be open to whatever comes next after I'm done the steps.
To challenging your belief system.
100%, bro. I agree that the decision doesn't get made till after the steps. And then you can see what a person needs for outside help. And that outside help could be psychiatrist, psychologist, could be those drugs, whatever is needed. And it has to come from the person on the journey, right? That's why rigorous honesty has to be so at the forefront. So you can look at yourself, and us having these discussions, you have to look at yourself and go, is this fucking a crutch? Am I relying on this still? And am I afraid to leave it because of whatever the reason is? And then you have to take that. But it's also my job to help push you to look at that stuff. And so when Janine talks about this being an outside issue, to me, it's not a fucking outside issue, because it's part of what I do as a sponsor. Is I've seen what I've seen. And I've seen people fucking throw away the wind at their chances of living a best life because they're afraid to fucking let go of something. And I know the power of fucking God in somebody's life, and I've seen it. The vitality of relying on God and not a fucking drug for your whatever it is. But I will never tell somebody to go off it, but I'm going to fucking make you think. I've worked with enough people that have tried all the different ways. And I know Jesse has too, right? So, so I'm just sharing my experience, man. I'm not a fucking doctor, but I know the disease better than a fucking doctor does. I'll fucking tell you that. And like Michael said, they don't fucking know. They're at a loss. They don't even know what's going on. They're just going to throw more drugs at you because they don't fucking know. They don't have an answer to this illness. And I know that also because I go to these fucking addiction conferences and I hear the fucking nonsense coming out of their fucking mouths. And what they're doing fucking drives me nuts. But whatever. Anyway. Let's keep going.
It's a hot topic. I was going to say that I think that people who say that anger is okay in program are maybe just coming off of like the mental health movement of validating and giving empathy and just taking that too far. And I think, like Bill said, to just say, like, I think validating a person's experience to say people are sick, too, just like us, and that's it. And now what's your part? And not staying too long and letting a person be angry or sit in their anger. Bill was talking about the communication piece and how with his girlfriend partner, and how he was dishonest in that he didn't communicate how he felt. And a lot of that is like when we retaliate and avoid retaliation or argument. I think that for me, I have to also avoid not speaking the truth. So if I'm angry and if I'm resentful, I think that there's a value in being able to speak to the person and say your honest truth. So for a long time, I used we avoid retaliation and argument. I used that as a way to justify avoidance and avoiding the conflict. And so that's something I've had to change lately, is that I'm not gonna argue, and I'm not gonna get back at and be like coming at somebody. I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna think, and I'm not gonna just leave it at that if there's something to be said, because if I have something to say, silence is a lie. And I need to go back with the anger and work through it. And so I just wanted to say that, because that's something that's changed for me, because that line was such a justification for me for so long. And so this program, like when we go through this, it's taught me how to see the truth, and that I need to communicate the truth in most of the situations. Sometimes I do need to hold my tongue if I'm in the mall and I don't know the person. But when I'm pretty angry, there's a value in going back and being able to have a respectful communication, because the fancy resentments and stuff, when people get angry, that's just lack of communication, and it's lack of understanding almost all the time. And so what the steps have taught me is to see the truth in my part, and to move past the fear and communicate what I really think about the situation in a respectful way. And through doing that, the conflict is actually not conflict at all. It presents itself as conflict, but it's really an opportunity for connection and growth.
Yeah, if the other person is interested in that, for sure. Because if they're not, then there's no connection. There's growth within that you, but not the other person. And then also she started off with like, why would we think anger is okay? Well, because the environment of maybe some of the rooms we go into, they've accepted that is okay. The reason why I even brought it up is because of what the book says. Because I go to meetings and I hear that it is okay. But when I look at the literature, in many aspects throughout the literature, it talks about that it's not okay. And it's actually an opportunity to allow to do self-reflection, because anger is never really the issue, right? It's actually emotional security is what I've kind of narrowed it down to. It's some type of emotional security that's not getting met somehow through some type of validation need that we're seeking or trying to search some type of security. So there's a lot of things in there. Did you want to share on anything else? Because I shared on that paragraph for a good 15 minutes.
I know you did. It was very thorough. No, I don't know. I think we can move on. I think we've talked enough about anger.
Okay, fear.
Notice the word fear bracketed alongside the difficulties with Miss Brown, Miss Jones, and the employer and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil corroding thread, and the fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we ourselves not set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was as good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so, for we are now on a new basis with the trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role he assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us, we humbly rely on him. We humbly rely on him. Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? We never apologize to anyone for depending upon Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be at once we commence to outgrow fear. My book is marked up.
Okay, so back to notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown and Mrs. Jones, the employer and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. And when Janine and I were talking earlier about the number one offender. When you're first in the program, resentment is the number one offender, and it can actually become the number one offender again. But really, once you start working a good, serious program, resentment isn't going to be the number one offender for you. What'll be the number one offender is fear. So when you get a certain ways into your program, let's say a year, 2 years, you're working solid program, the number one offender becomes fear. And it's the one that you got to watch out for. When we talk about this disease as cunning, baffling, and powerful, it's not the alcohol and the drugs that's cunning, baffling, and powerful. Okay? It's fear. Fear creeps in, and fear is hidden behind good intention. Fear is hidden behind your belief systems. Okay? So I'm going to use an example of that. Okay, so you walk out the door of your house and you're in fear the minute you walk out of your house. You don't really walk out of your house and go, oh, I'm in fear. But what's driving you as you walk out of your house? Well, right now it's the price of our electricity is really expensive. You know, gas is pretty expensive. Everything's pretty expensive. So everything that we're doing is fear-based. Fuck, I got to go to work. I got to make sure that that electricity is covered. I got to make sure I have a roof over my head. I got to make sure. So I'm living in a constant state of fear. But I normalize it so much. But what I'm actually doing is I'm producing chemicals in my body that is flight, fight, or freeze. And I'm actually getting myself mentally not well because of that. And I get actually physically sick too. So people talk about like burnout. They get stressed, and we always have these stress relieving type things at work or in society. Relieve the stress. All the stress that we suffer from comes from fucking fear. Oh, I walk in. So I was in a relationship for years, and I remember I'd be driving home, or let's say I'd be sponsoring, and it went 10 minutes over. I said I was going to be home at 5, and I'm going to get home at 15 after 5. The fucking fear that I went through driving home, because I knew that she was going to give me shit for being 15 minutes fucking late. And as I'm approaching that fucking 15 minutes late in the sponsorship, I feel it in my body. I am now not engaged with the person I'm working with, and I can feel the chemicals and shit start moving, and I'm not even present. Why? Because I'm living in the future of fear. And so that whole relationship was based on a lot of fear. So that whole relationship, I wasn't fucking well in a lot of it. And then I would take that to different people, and they'd be like, what's wrong with you? You don't seem yourself. I'd be like, no, I'm myself, but I wasn't myself because I was in a constant state of disturbance within my head, right? So fear can drive like every aspect of your life. How does my life look today? I don't fucking believe I live in a lot of fear today. I have a lot of trust in my God. I don't fucking freak out about much. I don't worry too much about much, like honestly. And anyone who really knows me, they really do believe that I don't really worry about too much, because I know that God has a plan for me. And if that plan means you're fucking moving out of your apartment, you're moving in with your mom, you know, I'm not going to really like that. And I don't really want that. But if that's what has to happen, I know there's a lesson in it somehow for me. And it's going to generate more humility if that's what I'm seeking, right? To be willing to work for humility takes most of us a long fucking time. And I don't need it to take a long time today. I'm willing to fucking accept it and learn it, try to seek it like right away. So fear is cunning, right? And when I talk about in your life, as you're in recovery, you can live with the best of intention, but under the intention is the motive. The motive is the most important, because if you're living with the best of intention, you're still going to be self-seeking. You're still going to be living in self-centered fear. You're going to still be grabbing and snatching and prying and running the show. And because it's based in self, you will still step on the toes of your fellows, and you will still be in conflict with other people and yourself, because fear is always in conflict and it creates confusion. So the goal is to identify the cunningness of the fear and fucking expose it for what it is and fucking bring God into the fear. Does that make sense? Do you guys know what I mean when I say the difference between running your life with the best of intention and under the intention is motive? Does anyone not understand that? Okay. It is a process and it takes time, right? It takes time. And I'll always say, this is kind of aligns perfectly with what this one statement that I always say. It takes you 2 to 3 fucking solid years to understand self at the level where you can fucking grow into the 4th dimension and really live like the best life. But you got to be following all the disciplines of the program so that you can understand what I'm saying here about self. And a lot of that self is identifying the cunningness of the self-centered fear in it all. And once you get good at identifying fear, then you can identify self-seeking, then you can identify self-righteousness, you can identify all these other things, and then you're really on the right track because the motive exposes itself. But it takes fucking good 2 or 3 years to really fucking do that well. And like Paul just said, you have to have God-centered pillars who are really doing that same thing. But there's a lot of people in the program that just run off the best of intention. But those people, and we're no better or no worse than them, they're just on a different level, and not all levels fucking interact the same way. And that's okay. But is it okay? Well, water finds its own level, right? So a lot of people fucking around are going to find each other, and that's what happens. A lot of people fucking around find each other and they relapse and they fucking fight each other and they're resentful, and it's okay to be angry. Or you can try to find forgiveness. You can try to find your fault in it, and you can try to fucking grow and fucking love and do the things that are different, right? The fellowship of the spirit. It's different.
Like we were talking about on break, how you felt as though you were gonna distance yourself from a friendship because you just didn't relate anymore. And that happens too. Like that's probably how it's been for me. The most common way has been just like, as I do this program, I have less interest in certain things and people just kind of fall away because we're not on vibing the same. So it kind of just straightens itself out in a way. My grandma would talk about the evil and corroding thread, but in Christianity, it was the devil, right? And so when I read that the God is in us and everybody has this fundamental idea, that was the God part. And then when I read fear as the evil and corroding thread, I thought of her and her teachings on like the devil and good side, dark side or whatever. But how I've made sense of the fear is like, in her terms, she would say, like, when you pray to God, you have spiritual warfare. I talked about this last week, I think a bit, but like, I kind of expect if I'm going to have faith and I'm going to be trying to seek God, that there's going to be whatever the dark side is, because there seems to be one. And we talk about it all the time where we pray for something and then we get it in a certain way, or we find God and then we get something going on that wants to take us down. And so my grandma talked about that a lot. And so when I think of fear, I do think of that dark side and that I do need to bring God in to balance that out and to overcome it. And so the stuff like when it says, see where the religious people are right. It's amazing to me how this literature just fits over top of different religions so smoothly. It's amazing.
So the fabric of our existence was shot through with it. That means it's like in us, right? It's the fabric of our existence. Like fear's kind of woven into my shirt as far as like in my being goes, right? It sets in motion trains of circumstances that bring us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. And think about that. Think of a train, 100-car train. It sets in motion trains of circumstances. So the circumstance at fucking car number 75, and then the circumstance at car number 100. You know, it sets in motion trains of circumstances, but it started at the first car. What was the first car? Well, maybe it was a fear of need of validation. So I need validation at work and I didn't get it at work, or maybe I'm trying to get it at work. So I'm fucking selling out my fucking truth. I can't speak up to my boss and tell him the truth because I'm worried of how I'm going to look. And so 100 cars down the road, I'm getting fired. And I'm like, that ain't fucking fair. Look what I've done for you. I've been here every day for the last 3 years and now you're firing me? but I set in motion trains of circumstances. And all the way through those 100 cars of trains of circumstances, I was brought misfortune that I felt I didn't deserve. You know, look at these guys getting the fucking raise and getting the promotion. Look at those guys going out with all the hot chicks from the company. And my whole issue is I can't even speak up. I can't stand in a place of truth and say, you know what? Here's my work. My work's just as good as theirs. But you know what? Maybe it is. But unless I show them my work, no one knows, right? And then by the end of it, I'm getting fired. Well, don't you see the 3 years of service I put in? Well, they never saw any of my work. They never saw really what I can bring for value. They saw a meek, shy, weak little person who wasn't able to stand up in his own truth. And they need people who are authentic. And I can't be authentic because I haven't learned that. And like looking back over those 100 cars of trains of circumstances and taking inventory, fuck through that process, I'm probably going to be pretty humiliated in some aspects of my life. I'm going to be like, holy shit, look at how I don't have an ability to stand up, right? And that hurts me. That hurts my pride. But unless I feel that hurt and that pride, that sense of pride and that humiliation, I won't do something to grow out of it. And if I don't look at it, I'm resisting it. And like Janine said, it's not the relationships that it's my relationship with myself that's causing all these relationships to go away. Because I'm the common denominator in all the relationships that leave, but I'm always going to blame you. So I blame my boss. I blame all the people that I worked with, all the trains of circumstances. But until I accept me and look at my stuff, I won't fucking grow out of it. And it'll continue again. And usually when a person looks at their life, and I just used the work situation this time, when you look at all the situations of your work life or your personal life, that's why all these inventories are so important, because it shows you the patterns. When we get into the sex conduct here next session, we'll see a lot of it. And what I want to kind of highlight here about sex conduct, just quickly, you can use the sex conduct not just for people you had sex with, for any single person in your life. And that whole sex conduct inventory is super, super helpful to use in any person in your life. Whom did we hurt? Where was I selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? You know, blah, blah, blah. I won't get into it much here, but anyway. Anything before we finish off fears on this page?
I was just gonna say that the thing I see like often lately, maybe not the most common, but definitely it's been a theme lately, is people having a opportunity to say something, and it doesn't look like it's a much thing. It's just like a little just interaction where they stuffed it because they didn't want to make it worse or whatever, but they failed to actually speak up in whatever insignificant way it actually is. Sometimes it's just they have a differing of opinion. So they miss that opportunity, and then they miss that opportunity. And then because like you said, it's the conflict is still there. So if you don't have a conflict out here, it doesn't go away up here. It just, you will meet the path, the enemy on the path traveled to avoid it. And as you're avoiding, it seems to get its power, and then it's a big kaboom. And through that pain, humiliation, I think a person becomes willing to at least try to say more in the moment, and to just take a risk of, when I talked to somebody on the break too about not being able to tell people the truth. And if you ask somebody, do you want me to give you the fluffy, dishonest version, or do you want me to tell you the truth? I've never had anybody say, can you give me the fluffy, dishonest version? Like, I've never had that happen. And so people, even in a counseling setting, I'll say, like, do you want to do this the long way or the short way? Because I can just tell it to you, but we haven't really had enough sessions that I feel like I'm going to not hurt your feelings. We don't have rapport. But even then they'll say, let's just give it to me. And so people want to know the truth. So we shouldn't be scared to say it, because we want it too.
And it kind of aligns with this line. We think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. And if we don't get a handle on fear in our lives, life slips away on you. Fear will steal relationships from you. Fear will steal jobs. It'll steal opportunities. Fear is the fucking number one offender. And it has to be fucking dealt with God. Because you can't live with fear and God in the same. Okay? There's fucking love and then there's fear, and love combats fear.
And in those small moments when people are avoiding or fearing and not doing what they feel they ought to, it's like, how do you expect to gain the muscle in that area to actually do it when it really matters? You know, when you're at a place where you really actually got to speak up, but you've never practiced in these small moments and you've never leveled up in that way. So you'd be at level 0 and then you're expected to stand up for yourself. Well, you haven't faced anything and you haven't developed in that area, the character building that is necessary for the bigger things. So when we let God discipline us in the way that he shows fit, it's like you get some practice a lot of times then, and take that practice, take the small opportunities so that, you know, God can prepare you for the bigger things that are coming.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we won't go through the rest of this. Let's leave it till next week.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll just leave the actual list of fears we'll talk about next week, and how to deal with the fears and how to bring God into the fears. But what I will say to finish this off is Janine was touching base on like kind of how to work through these micro moments of trying something different. Well, that's why the relationship with God-centered pillars and sponsors is so important. That's why step 10 becomes utmost important. And step 10, actually, how it's written in the book, not how it's written in the wall or talked about in the meetings.
Because step 10 is the small moments.
Step 10 is the small moments. And one of the biggest things in that process when you call somebody else is fear. So you can get some guidance on it. They can reassure you with God in your prayer. And they can give you a pat on the back with some confidence that you can do this. Because when anyone ever calls me, I'm like, okay, this is the moment. This is it. There's one who has all knowledge and power. That one is God. You must find him now. So now we're finding God now together in that moment. So let's say a prayer, you know, and then we say the prayer. And then it's like, okay, hang up the phone, go do it. What are you doing? Well, page 72 in the 12 and 12. With a proper display of honesty and morality, you stand a better chance of getting what you really want. You be honest and be moral. You don't lie. You don't be dishonest, and you fucking tell the truth. And now you go and you approach that person and you be honest and moral. And 9 times out of 10, what happens? The fucking fear of being honest, you do it and you get what you fucking wanted. Normally, we're going to go into that situation and be a little dishonest, not really tell them the truth and try to manipulate it because we're in so much fear, and it's fear, 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 fear. Now you go in with the trust of God and love and fucking accept the results, whatever they be. But if you're honest and moral, it usually works out 9 times out of 10 exactly how you wanted it in the first place or better.
But 100% of the time, it's going to work out the way that God's will is for your life.
100%. And through that, you build character. And through character, you build trust. And through trust, you build fucking a relationship authentically with yourself. And you may not get what you want out of that one, like that 10% that you won't get what you want out of that. But that's okay. So you're building like authentic truth with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the next time, you can fucking build on that. And I always say the benefit of working these steps and doing what's hard doesn't always come right now. It comes through your persistent, consistent commitment to change, and it comes down the road. That's when a lot of the benefits come, is like down the road. And you're just like, wow, most people are going to seek that benefit now. They're going to do what they need to do to try to get the benefit now. The only problem is the benefit is actually not true. The real benefit comes down the road, which is why this is so hard to do, right? But which is why it's so important to try to do it. And there's no guarantee on the benefit. That's the other thing. There's no guarantee that the benefit actually lies down there. So it's kind of a leap of faith, right? And it's a leap of faith, kind of trust in the sponsor or the people around you who are telling you that that's the truth, right? Because left to your own devices, it's like, fuck, do I really believe that? No, it's too scary. So I'm just going to default to my old behaviors and get the benefit out of whatever it is now. But if enough of you guys are telling me, and I see enough of you guys walking the path, and you say that the benefits down there, I'm going to take the leap of faith because I trust that you guys trusted your God, and I'm going to trust your God maybe to the point where, like Janine talked about weeks and weeks ago, where your own faith carries you and there's no need. And now people are coming to you and going, fuck, I want that faith, bro. Right? And you're just like, well, then do these things. And then you're coming to me, fuck, these guys aren't doing those things. I'm like, they usually won't. Right? But if we get enough of us like doing this stuff, you know, it really affects like the collective of more people, right? And I can see the results of that. There's a meeting I go to. There's 11 one-year fucking birthdays this month. 11 fucking one-year birthdays. Never in my recovery have I ever seen that. And it's becoming more and more and more of that. Why? Because of fucking what we're doing right here. And you guys taking that to the meeting, telling them what step 10 is. Telling them, no, fear is actually in the book. No, it's not. I mean, anger is not acceptable. I have to look at myself and find out why I'm angry. And taking these messages is why there's fucking 11 one-year birthdays on that fucking board, man. So, you know, my gratitude to you guys for coming and listening to like Janine and I spew out what we fucking think we know and trying to be of service, and then you guys just, you know, taking it and listening and helping us. So anyway,